Welcome to the Home Birth After Cesarean podcast. Due to the rate of unnecessary C-sections, the lack of support, and limited options for VBAC moms in the hospital, more and more women are choosing to have their VBAC babies at home. This podcast was created for women to share and listen to stories of home birth after cesarean. I'm your host, Rachel Garrett. Today we're chatting with Dana, and she is going to share her 3 birth stories with us. So she had C-sections with her first 2 babies, and then with her third, she had a home birth. So Dana, do you just want to give us a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. I'm a mom of 3 girls, of 2 dogs, wild dogs, and a wonderfully supportive husband. I live in the suburbs of Chicago. Love to crochet. I'm a labor and postpartum doula and a placenta encapsulation specialist for about the past 7 years.
Very cool. If you don't mind giving yourself a little selfless plug, do you have like a website, or are you on Instagram or any social media or anything if anyone listening wants to connect with you?
I'm actually currently working on my personal website, but I am affiliated with Third Coast Birth and Baby in Chicago, and I also do placentas for Cloud9 Birth Services. So
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So yeah, if you just want to take us to wherever you want to start, you go right ahead.
Okay. So with my first pregnancy, my now husband and I were dating on and off for about a year and living in Chicago, living it up, working at bars. And it was kind of a surprise. I had a feeling that I was pregnant. It was just like this strange intuition. And I was like, how the heck did I get pregnant? And now I realize that I just did not understand fertility at all. I was like, oh, I just had my period a few days ago. There's no egg there, just it's fine. So we got pregnant, and I kind of woke him up by saying, hey, I'm pregnant. I made an appointment at this place to go get an actual test. Let's go. We hopped on the L train and went and got tested. And sure enough, I was pregnant. And I feel like typically that would be kind of scary for a lot of people, but I was like, all right, let's do this. What do we do first? And so I just, at the time, we weren't married. I was a waitress / bartender, not making very much money. So I got on state aid right away and just saw whatever doctor was closest to me. We were living in ended up moving in with him within like a month and living in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. I didn't really question anything with my doctors. I just kind of went through the motions and did what they told me to do. And then once I announced my pregnancy on Facebook, a closer friend of mine reached out and sent me information, and she said, you need to watch this documentary, Business of Being Born. It'll blow your mind. So of course I did immediately, and I will say that's what started everything for me. Like, it kind of changed my path. So I ended up switching to a midwife OB practice that was about 45 minutes away from Chicago, but closer to my family. So I went there. I loved them. They were great. I had awesome care. I did not understand that you really aren't supposed to eat for 2. So I gained about 80 pounds, and I'm only 5'3". So it kind of, I blew up pretty fast, and my blood pressure was being monitored. Gestational diabetes was being monitored. And I luckily didn't have any of that, but it was kind of borderline. And she was measuring ahead by like 2 to 4 weeks, almost the entire pregnancy. I kind of knew my conception date, and I thought, okay, I think my due date should be about May 1st. Well, according to the ultrasounds and everything, they said, no, your due date is like April 22nd. So we went with that. And then as the pregnancy progressed, they were like, maybe more like April 15th, and they kind of moved it. And then April 15th passed and they changed it back to April 22nd. April 22nd passed by, and, first time mom, I'm like, any second now, any day now, she's coming. And when she didn't come by 40 weeks, typical first time mom is like, oh, well, what's wrong? What's going on? And so at 41 weeks, they stripped my membranes without my knowledge. They just said, oh, we're going to stir things up a little bit. It was very painful, not comfortable at all. And I left that appointment. I had some spotting, gorged on some Arby's, and went home, took a nap. And then I woke up and I was talking on the phone with my girlfriend. My boyfriend had just come home from work and he was starting the shower when I felt, it was almost like I heard a pop, but like it was just this huge gush. And I thought I peed myself at first. And then I was like, oh, wait, I'm going to have to hang up with you. I don't know what's going on. So I rushed into the bathroom and I was like, out of my way. I got to get in the shower. Sure enough, it was definitely my water broke. We called like a good patient. I called my doctor right away. They told me to come in right away. So we packed up and I grabbed a piece of toast and went right in. And when we got there, it was just kind of like, well, I guess we'll just sit here and wait.
Were you having contractions at all?
None. I had zero symptoms, minus just having my water broke. Like I had nothing, like no signs of labor. Earlier at my appointment that day, he had said I was hard and fully closed, like maybe a dimple dilated, and that was it, like nothing. And it was still further back. So really starting at nothing and just sitting around. And since I had watched The Business of Business of Being Born, and that's really all I followed. What is it? Is it Birth Center, or the app that they send you updates on, like,
Baby
this is
Center?
what you should be doing. Baby Center, thank you. And that's pretty much the extent of my preparation for birth, because I figured my grandmothers one had 6 kids, one had 7 kids, all naturally ranging from 6 to 10-pound babies. They were petite women. I was like, my mom had all 3 of us, no problem. So what, we know how to do this. We're women. And so I really just left it up to fate. So I was like, I want to go all natural, all natural. So I didn't get anything. I just sat. We walked around. Maybe after 6 to 8 hours, I started to get some contractions, but in hindsight, they were really nothing compared to what it really feels like. I had sat in a tub, got in the shower, sat on a ball, had a peanut ball, all the things. I had a wonderful nurse as my first shift. She was wonderful. And then after that, it was just kind of like they'd come in, check on me, like, oh yeah. Oh, I also had a 2-page birth plan, very detailed. So I'm sure they were like, yeah, lady. After about 18 hours and only being 3 centimeters, they suggested pitocin. So I did that. They also suggested an epidural, which I declined. I said, I can do this. My mom had pitocin with me and my sisters and didn't get any pain meds, and she was fine. So I did that for about another 3 hours, and my blood pressure was through the roof. So they were like, you need something to relax you, because pitocin was quite intense. So I got the epidural, and I think I said the F word almost immediately, like, this is so wonderful, such a relief. So I took a nap, and then my sister came and we played some card games, and then my dad came to say hi on his way home from work, and then my aunt happened to be in town. She stopped by to say hi. Like, it was just like, I'm just sitting there waiting for things to happen. Around 36 hours, I was only 6 centimeters, and I also had gotten a fever. So my OB said, "Oh, I totally forgot. I was seeing the midwife through the second half of my pregnancy once I switched. And 2 weeks before my due date, she took an indefinite leave of absence out of nowhere. And I had never seen the OB, but luckily I loved him. He was great. So he was all on board for me being all, trying to go all natural. And after 36 hours and getting a fever, he said, "I'm not going to force you to have a C-section, but I think it might be your best option at this point." So I trusted him and I was like, you know what, this is the best option. Let's do this. So around 37 hours post water breaking, we had the C-section. I kept saying during the procedure that I was feeling really nauseous. I'm going to throw up. I'm going to throw up. And the anesthesiologist was like, no, no, it's fine. And I was also freezing. I was shaking. And they pulled the baby out and they went to show her to me. And I immediately just vomited all over my hair, all over my face. It was stuck in my mouth. And so I'm like, I told you I was going to throw up. So they basically took her back to do all the, newborn procedures while they cleaned me up. And then they just whisked her away. And my husband went with her up to the NICU, I believe, not for because she was in trouble, but just because they wanted to like do all, I don't know what they were doing up there, to be honest, now that I look back. But my husband has pictures of her like in the little plastic bin. And then they took me to recovery and I waited about another like hour. So I didn't see her for almost 2 hours. And they brought her back to me and they bathed her. And I tried breastfeeding, which was not natural at all. It was very difficult. She had trouble latching. Once we got to our mother baby room, she started, every time I tried to latch her, she would cry and it was painful and she was breathing very fast. So they took her to the NICU for observation and then gave her antibiotics just in case and did some tests. And so she was in the NICU for the rest of the stay. Luckily, the tests came back negative. She was fine, but it was very difficult having to get up every 2 hours to go to the NICU to try and breastfeed. Breastfeeding wasn't working well, so they gave her formula. And then I was pumping after every feed. And once I got home, my husband had to go right to work. He's a union carpenter, so he doesn't get any paid time off and we needed the money. So he went straight back to work. I had my mom, my mother-in-law, and a couple of my sisters came to help here and there, but it was really rough. I was not prepared for the postpartum part of anything. Pumping after every feed, using a nipple shield, just it was very rough. I felt very unprepared for postpartum for sure.
Plus, recovering from a
Uh,
major surgery,
yes,
too.
I felt like my incision was going to rip open every time I stood up. It was just like, still to this day, like I have certain ways of doing things. Like when I go to the bathroom, I lift my shirt up a certain way, and it's interesting, like the habits I formed post C-section. So that was fun. Breastfeeding was definitely a challenge. We eventually got it. I think after 5 weeks, we kicked the nipple shield. We were still supplementing once a day. Her weight gain was very slow. Still to this day, she's tiny. So, oh, she was 9 pounds, 12 ounces as well. But she's a little peanut now. So it's interesting how that happens.
So then how long after she was born did you get pregnant with your second?
So Emmy Lou is my second baby. We found out again by surprise because I didn't understand fertility still. 12 months postpartum. It was right after my oldest first birthday. I told my husband, I was like, I feel like something is growing inside of my uterus. And he was like, what? You can't possibly feel something. I'm like, something's going on down there. And I feel like I have a feeling. And sure enough, we were pregnant. I stayed with the same OB because I loved them. I just felt very comfortable and at home there. I had a healthy pregnancy. I knew a little more because post when my oldest was 9 months, I took a lactation course to become a breastfeeding peer counselor, and just being with those people kind of in the baby birthing network, I just made connections and joined groups and learned all sorts of things. So I kind of felt much more prepared this time. I only gained like 23 pounds, totally normal. I felt healthy. I started seeing a chiropractor. I felt wonderful. At 20 weeks, again, just like my first pregnancy, I decided to switch to a midwife group that everyone had been raving about, also with an OB that is known for VBAC, being VBAC friendly. So I switched, just followed my gut, even though I loved the people I was with. I just knew I needed to switch. Around 32 weeks, I found a doula. Money was tight, but I was like, this seems like a necessity. Like, I just feel like I need someone in my corner. I'm going to VBAC. I'm going to do this. So I was doing all the things, chiropractic, massage. My doula was also a massage therapist, which was wonderful. And she used me for many of her classes. And
Had
I'm
you
sorry.
always known that you wanted to do a VBAC after your first birth, or how did that kind
Yes,
of come into
yes.
play?
I'm very stubborn. I'm naturally minded, if that makes sense. Like, it's just, I've always felt like a pull to the root of being a human, like I'm like, this is anthropologically the way we're supposed to be. Like, that's always
Mm-hmm.
come easy to me. I've always understood it. So it kind of just fell into place. And I was like, immediately I knew I wanted to be back. I was asking the questions. As soon as I got pregnant again, I was like, am I good? And also, as soon as I watched The Business of Being Born with my first pregnancy, I wanted a home birth. But at the time, we lived in such a tiny apartment. We were poor. I was like, I made all the excuses as to why I couldn't have a home birth. In hindsight, I'm like, oh, maybe it would have, come out different. But I try not to do that because I wouldn't be where I am and have the knowledge and be able to help other women without having that experience. So
Mm-hmm.
I was doing all the things with the second pregnancy. I started red raspberry leaf tea. I was eating my dates. I was eating healthy. And then around 39 weeks, I slipped at a restaurant. It had been snowing, and the front of the restaurant was wet, and my toddler was running around, and I chased after her, and I slipped. I practically did the splits, and I pulled my groin muscle. I spent the night in the ER getting x-rays to make sure I didn't fracture my pelvis and make sure the baby was fine. And it was, I like couldn't sit or lay or stand, like everything hurt. I had pulled everything, and I was devastated because I was like, I'm 39 weeks. How am I going to have a VBAC with a broken vagina? Like, I just kept saying, my vagina's broken. Like, I can't relax. Like, everything's tight. So I went to a chiropractor and stretched and tried to heal from that. And I was still pretty sore, but around 40, yeah, it was 40 weeks. I was nursing my toddler. She never weaned herself. She just continued to nurse through the pregnancy. And I was nursing her to sleep at, I think I was exactly 40 weeks. And around 10:30 p.m., I heard a pop in my head. My water didn't break. There was no physical pop, but like in my head, something clicked, and I felt a contraction that felt much different. So luckily she had fallen asleep and I just went into the bedroom. I lit some, or the bathroom, and I lit some candles and got my ball and was sitting on the ball. I forgot, I had also started taking hypnobirthing around 32 weeks. So I'd been practicing that. So I got my hypnobirthing book out. I was reading through all the, the day of birth stuff and meditating and relaxing my body. And I was doing pretty good. Once I sat on the toilet, TMI, but like the birth poop, the bowels just emptied. And I was texting my doula and I was like, yeah, I think this is it. So she's like, well, just keep me posted, keep, an eye on contractions. So I did that and texted her back, a few hours later saying they're about 10 minutes apart. Then a little while later, I'm like, they're 7 minutes apart. She's like, okay, I'm going to start getting ready. Just keep me posted. And then they were 5 minutes apart. And she's like, okay. And at this point, I didn't really feel like I needed hands on support yet, which is what I always tell my clients. You're in active labor. If you need hands on support, everything, yada, yada. And I just still didn't feel like I needed physical support, but they were 5 minutes apart. So she said, you know what, let's just meet at the hospital. On the way there, the contractions were 3 minutes apart. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have this baby in the car. And we get there, my doula meets us there at the exact same time. And we get up into the triage and they're like, oh, there are no tub rooms available, which was my whole plan, was to labor in this tub. And the tub room was being used by someone else. So immediately I'm, like irritated, and they're trying to have me fill out paperwork and answer questions. And I'm just so annoyed. I'm like, can't you see I'm like having a baby here? So they get me settled into a room that did not have a tub. And the midwife that was on call with the practice happened to be my least favorite of all of them. So I was just kind of feeling, bummed, and contractions slowed down and they kind of fizzled out. They were just sporadic after that. And then the tub room became available at the same time my favorite midwife came on call. So I want to say it was around 7 a.m. So things were looking up. I changed rooms. I got in the tub. I was doing my hypnobirthing. I was listening to crashing waves with seagulls, and it was beautiful. I was like falling asleep in between contractions. And I got to 10 centimeters, and the nurse that was on duty, she happened to be out of the room. And so I looked at my midwife and I was like, am I gonna, do you think I can just like have the baby in the tub? And she's like, I don't know, I guess we'll see. So we kind of just sat there for a while. I labored more in the tub, and then I felt like getting out. The nurse at the time had a very strong smell of perfume, which my husband says he did not remember any smell, but it was bothering me. My eyes would be closed and I'd be trying to relax. And I knew when she came in the room because I could smell her. So it was very interesting. But I decided to get out of the tub. We sat on the toilet. We got in the shower. When I was in the tub and I was 10 centimeters, I started having involuntary contractions, which I had never felt before. Not involuntary pushing. Like my body was just like dry heaving almost. And so I also had a lip. So she had me doing lunges to try and get rid of the lip. And I was doing all the things. They had a birth stool that I had been trying to get on. And when I sat on that birth stool, something happened. Like I got my muscle cramped in my butt cheek, like by your sciatic nerve. And like a Charlie horse, it hurt so bad. It was the most painful thing up to this point, like that I had ever experienced. And pushing was the only relief that I got. but in between contractions, they would say, try and relax, try and relax. And I'm like, I can't relax. I have a cramp in my butt. It won't go away. Like it was the worst. It was the worst. I just couldn't relax. And so I got into the bed and they had me doing different positions on my side, on my back, on my knees. And baby was coming. They could see her head, but then she'd go right back up. And my water was bulging. And they were like, oh, do you want to feel it? And my midwife was like, no, don't touch it. And like, just as I was about to touch it, it broke everywhere. And there was meconium and tons of fluid. And I continued to push for about 3 hours and she just wasn't coming. There were some decels, but nothing, alarming. And I was just super tired. And the OB on call, who was not the OB with the practice, had come in and said, I know you really wanted this, but in my opinion, you need to have another C-section. And at that point, I was just so spent and I hadn't slept and I was starving. And so I agreed to it. It was a much better C-section. It was gentler. I didn't feel paralyzed afterwards. The epidural that I had with the first birth was, I like couldn't move my legs for the longest time. I did have a hard time staying still in the OR, but once it was administered, I felt wonderful. It was great. My midwife came in because I could not sit still during the epidural and I was crying and I was scared and it wasn't what I wanted. And so she was a very tall woman. She grabbed me and my face was like in between her breasts. And she was just like, I've got you, just relax, hold still. And with her comfort, I was able to. And baby came out and she was beautiful. I was like, she looks just like Bridget, who's my sister. And she came straight to my chest and she tried nursing like right away. She was crawling for my breast. So it was a much better experience and a different recovery for sure, but still really rough. Breastfeeding again was terrible, painful latch. I also found out during my lactation peer counseling class that my oldest had a severe lip tie, and I had no idea what those were at the time. And so with this one, I knew the signs, I knew what to look for. And for sure, she had a lip tie. And the ENT came and said, yes, she definitely has a lip tie. They took care of that right away, but still, I needed a nipple shield for almost 2 months. But luckily, she gained weight really well and it went really well. But I was also nursing now two babies. So that was also a challenge, but somehow I got through it. I also had postpartum anxiety, postpartum rage, intrusive thoughts. So I did end up at my 6-week postpartum visit with my midwife. I was in the middle of changing the baby and I was using cloth diapers because, I really care about the environment and it was very important to me. But I was sobbing. I was just sobbing while changing her diaper into this cloth diaper. And my midwife said, okay, I'm giving you permission right now to go buy disposable diapers. Give yourself a break and cut yourself some slack. Like, just go do it, which felt very good. So I did that. So we ended up doing like 50-50 with the cloth at that point. And I got on Zoloft and everything started to get much better. But it was a rough postpartum, I will say.
Sometimes having that validation from someone else can be so, like, it just changes the way that you see things. Because I
Yeah.
remember that too, like, when I was pregnant, I'm like, I'm gonna be this kind of mom, I'm gonna do this after baby comes, and this, and this, and it's like half that stuff I did not end up doing. And then you feel so guilty because it's like, well, I know that this is what's best, or I know that this is what I wanted to do, but I just can't do it right now. And so I think that's an important thing to bring up, is just giving yourself grace. And sometimes it does help to hear someone else say, like, it's okay that you're not doing this, or it's okay to try something else, or even if it's just like temporarily giving yourself some slack. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes into being freshly postpartum and breastfeeding and taking care of, I mean, let one human, and then when you already have a toddler at home, bringing home a new baby, and there's a lot that goes into all of that.
Yeah. It was definitely it was like a weight lifted as soon as she said that. She's like,
Mhm.
just relax, just do what you need to do to get through this. She also had a wonderful friend who had two young daughters. They were 12 and 15, I think, come over a few times postpartum and as like a mommy's helper. So they came and played with my toddler while I laid down, took a nap, took a shower, and it was like the greatest thing ever. Like I can't say enough. That's what made me want to become a doula. And because of my doula, who I did not mention, Jean McHenry, who is now a midwife, but she was wonderful throughout my entire labor and pregnancy and postpartum. She brought me lactation cookies, and she did a wonderful massage in the hospital and came to my house and did a massage. She was just the most supportive. She went above and beyond like her call of duty. But having the postpartum care was just, it's like there's a missing link in women's women's care.
Mhm.
After having babies, it's like, oh, the baby's here, there you go, that's it, we'll see you in
Yeah.
6 weeks. And a lot happens between the birth and 6 weeks. So,
A
uh,
lot happens between the birth and 3 days later. I mean,
yes,
6week appointment is not enough follow-up after having a baby. And
no.
then to be expected too, like I had my son in the middle of winter, so for our 6-week appointment, we had to bundle up and we had to drive 30 minutes to go to the hospital, and we live in North Dakota, so it's icy
Oh
and
my
gross
gosh.
outside, and like it's not acceptable. I
Yeah.
mean,
It
just to put it
was
bluntly, like it's just
January.
not.
She was born January 27th. And during her postpartum, I remember they called it Chiberia, Chicago, Chi-town. It was like the windows were frozen, like everything. It was so cold that people were doing those experiments where they throw dyed water up in the air and it turns into snow. Like
Mhm.
it was absurd to be going out with a newborn.
Mhm.
Well, post C-section as well, it's just,
Yep. Can't hardly even carry the car seat through the hospital to get to your appointment because it's so heavy and you're
yeah.
trying to recover, and yeah,
And my
it's
husband had to go back to work right away again. Luckily, I set up my own meal train because I was like, well, I know what I need. This is what I need. So it was the best thing ever, having a meal train, having people bring food. So I did not have to worry about feeding my family. My husband could come home from work and prepare it. And it was a godsend having that care. And then anytime someone would come over, I'm like, I really need help with X, Y, and Z. Like I was not shy about saying what I needed this time because last time I tried to do all the things and I was a mess. I was still a mess this time too, but it was much, much better. So,
but good for you for being willing to say that too, because I think sometimes you feel guilty like asking other people for help. But as someone who's been through having a baby and being postpartum and all of this stuff, like I ask friends, I'm like, "Okay, what can I do? What can I bring you? Can I bring you a coffee? Can I bring you a meal?" And you still get the, "Oh no, we're fine" response.
yeah,
But I think those of us who have had a baby and experienced that, like I want to help. So that's super helpful when people will voice like this is what I want. And
yeah,
so
it
I
is
I find that
helpful.
very refreshing.
I tend to just like when my sister had her, she also had a C-section. I went over there and I just did things. I just
Mhm.
cleaned and I, helped her with breastfeeding and brought her food. And I didn't ask what she needed. I mean, I tried to ask what she needed, but of course she was fine. Everything's, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't need anything. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this anyways.
So
So
then after that birth, were you still like did you have VBAC in the back of your head
I
still or
did. I didn't know if we were going to have another or not. My husband is 10 years older than me. So, he was like, I don't know, like, we'll see. And then I had seen a different midwife group close to my house just for, regular care, pap smears and whatnot. And I mentioned to them, if I did get pregnant again, do you guys take VBACs? And they were like, oh, after two C-sections, absolutely not. That is not recommended. That is so dangerous. And so immediately I was like, you're fired, never coming back here again. Because I know, I had been going to ICANN meetings and doing my research. So I knew all about it. I also I started doing placenta encapsulation when my daughter was probably about 4 months old, my second daughter. And then later that year, I took doula training. So I was doing my homework and I was in the know. And about, I guess, 4 years later, it was summer of 2018. My husband and I were like, you know what? Let's try. This will be the first time we actually were trying. Let's try. And if it doesn't happen by the end of the year, then we're done. So it was May. We tried and immediately got pregnant. Thank God, because I know how hard it is for some people to get pregnant. My sister tried for a year and got pregnant. I was super excited. I didn't feel pregnant though. I just kind of felt like something was wrong. And everybody kept saying, no, it's probably just in your head. I wouldn't worry about it. And the line on the pregnancy test was so faint. So I went into the practice that I had attempted VBAC with my second child. And I went back to them. They did a test and they were like, yeah, this is very, very faint. We don't really expect, this to be a permanent pregnancy. And I was like, oh, well, that's a bummer. I didn't want to believe them. I was like, how can you know? How can you know? It says I'm pregnant. The line says I'm pregnant. So they had me go in for blood work. My levels were within normal range, but at the very bottom of normal. And then I think it was maybe 3 or 4 days later, I got another blood test and I got the results. Let's see. I ended up getting started. I started bleeding, and within an hour, I got the results that I was basically going to have a miscarriage. The numbers had dropped significantly. So I ended up having a miscarriage on July 1st, and I didn't get off the couch for almost 2 weeks. I was devastated. I think I was 6.5 weeks pregnant when I had the miscarriage. And then July 14th, my girlfriend convinced me to go out with her to this party, and I was dancing and having fun. It was just what I needed to like perk myself up. And the next day, my girlfriend had delivered her baby a few days prior. She had me doing her placenta in her home. And that morning, for some reason, my husband and I just felt the need. It was just, the mood struck. So we ended up having intercourse. And I was like, well, I just had a miscarriage. And the midwife said until I ovulate again, I'm probably unlikely to get pregnant this early. So just whatever, threw caution to the wind. And sure enough, so July 15th is when we conceived Rayleigh, our third, our rainbow baby. I felt different this time, and I had the worst. I didn't throw up, but I had all day nausea for the entire first trimester. So I was not worried at all with this pregnancy. It's just interesting how our intuition, like our instincts, like we just know things as women. So I stayed with the same OB and I loved him. I saw a midwife once in the practice, and then they changed their policy because they had been bought out by the hospital. So they had to abide by certain policies that I could not see a midwife after having 2 C-sections, not even for appointments, which I thought was absurd. But luckily, I loved the OB. He was great, totally relaxed. And then I find out that he is leaving the practice to start his own practice. And it was about an hour away from my house. And I was just not wanting to go all the way out there. So I thought, well, I guess I'll just see what this new OB in the practice is like. So I saw the new OB, and the first thing she said to me upon entering the room was, "Oh, I see that you want to have a VBAC after 2 C-sections. You know, you have a less than 25% chance of success, right?" Just like that. I was like,
Nice to meet
uh,
you too. Like,
like she didn't even
oh,
tell me her name unless I like totally blanked, but like it was like totally out of left field. And then she was like, "Oh, and I highly recommend you get the flu shot." And she was just like badgering me. Like, I just felt like she was manhandling me, like, I hate that term, but like, I felt like she was just taking charge of me and not hearing me and not listening to me. And I left that appointment in tears. And I called a doula friend of mine who is amazing, Robin Ross. She was also my hypnobirthing instructor with my second baby. And she was the first person I needed to call. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And so she suggested that I maybe look into, she gave me a couple recommendations of OBs that I could see, and then also recommended maybe looking into midwife. And since I had 2 C-sections, I couldn't see a CNM and have a home birth, at least in my area. So I had to look for CPMs, which in Illinois, it is illegal to have home births with CPMs, which we're hoping that it changed. It just passed the other day to go up to the next level. So hopefully that law will change. But so I ended up switching to a midwife, a home birth midwife CPM, and just knew right away. I just felt this relief of like, this is it. This is what I need to do. My husband wasn't 100% on board, but he knows that I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do because I do all the research. So he trusted me. We hired her, and it was interesting, our relationship. It was, I somehow, it came up, the number 11 11 11. I was like, at one of my appointments with her, she looked down at her phone and she was like, "It's 11 11." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I always look at my phone and it says 11 11." So throughout the rest of my pregnancy, anytime one of us would see 11 11, we would screenshot it and send it to each other. And it was just a nice, comfortable relationship. I saw my chiropractor throughout my whole pregnancy and did the dates and the red raspberry leaf tea and, oh, gestational diabetes. So before I had switched to this home birth midwife, they had me do the 1 hour test. I failed it. They called me and said, "We need you to go as soon as possible to take the 3 hour." And I said, I don't think I'm going to do that. Um, I don't really want to do that. I have 2 kids at home, and like 3 hours is a long time to just sit somewhere. So I'd rather just monitor it myself. And they were not on board with that. The midwives weren't, but I talked to the OB at the time, and he was like, "That's fine. Just fill out this sheet and with all your glucose monitoring and come to appointments with it." And it ended up being fine. I did the same with the midwife once I switched, and I had high fasting levels, but everything else was normal. So we just continued to monitor it. I switched my diet to like a gestational diabetes, diet, friendly diet, and exercise. I was very active. Also having 2 kids, I had to be active. The day before my due date, was a festival for kids. It was called Time for Tots. And so I invited my sister and her kids and my mom, and we went to this festival, and I was walking all day long. And that night, I decided to do the mile circuit because I was like, well, just, I'm almost 40 weeks. Let's just see, I'm just going to try this mile circuit thing. And that night, I ended up getting some cramping, like kind of like I'm getting my period. And I started getting some contractions, but they were very irregular. So I tried to get some sleep, but I couldn't sleep. But finally, around like 4:30 in the morning, I dozed off. I had been contacting my midwife this whole time. I'm like, I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I can't calm down. So I ended up falling asleep, but only for about an hour and a half. At like 6 a.m., I woke up and I just knew it was time. So I let my whole birth team know. My chiropractor, who also is a doula part time, said that she would come to my birth. So that was a godsend as well. My friend Sarah came over to get my dogs because I was like, I don't think I can labor with these crazy dogs all around me. And I wanted my kids to be there. In my heart, I wanted them to be there. And sometimes I regret not having them with me. But I was like, you know what? I can't relax right now with them here. My middle child is like a natural, she's an empath, and she was so great during my contractions. She would like be like, breathe, mommy. And she'd rub my shoulder and my back, and she'd say, it's okay. But then my oldest child, not an empath, was like patting me on the back and like trying to help, but like it was like I just wanted to swat her, like, no. Like, no. So my friend Sarah came and laid down with me for a little while in bed while I had some contractions, and I was having a lot of fear, and it didn't manifest. I did do hypnobabies study throughout my pregnancy. I don't know if I did the best job at studying it, but I thought I did. I like just could not get into it the day of. So my friend laid down with me, and she was just holding me. She was holding space for me, which was huge. And I just sobbed, and I had this huge fear release. And she's like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be exactly as it should be. She also did a blessing way for me, like a week prior to the birth, which was also very fun. It was fun to do the fear releasing and be blessed. So, anyways, I had a huge fear relief with her. I was a sobbing mess, and I just felt like a weight had been lifted just by her holding space for me. So she took the kids and the dog, and my husband started filling up the tub. We had gotten married in between the second and the third pregnancy, and he was not filling up the tub fast enough for me. I was like, I want to get in. So I ended up getting in our bathtub, which is not comfortable. And I was just relaxing. Midwife said, maybe have a glass of wine if you feel up to it. So I was drinking wine. I just couldn't. I just didn't want it. And they just got more intense, more intense. So, oh, I'm forgetting a part. Sorry. After my friend Sarah left, I couldn't relax. So we sat on the couch and tried to watch Game of Thrones because the new season was coming out. And I just couldn't do that. So that's when I got in the bath. I was like, I just need to go relax.
That's a super relaxing choice of show to
I
watch.
know. I'm like, what was I thinking? So after trying to just sit in the tub and relax for a while, I called my doula, and she was like, it was also her daughter's birthday that day. And I felt terrible. So around like 1:30, I called her, and I was like, I don't feel like I should need you, but I feel like I need you. So she came right away. She was there by like 2:30, and my contractions had started to get a lot closer together. I want to say they were between 3 and 4 minutes apart when she arrived. And the midwives were, or the midwife team was on their way as well, but they lived a little further away. So she came and it was amazing. She was just what I needed to relax me. I remember feeling like while I was waiting for the midwives that I was just going to have the baby before they got there. I was just in so much discomfort and felt like out of control. I also had, I have a close friend. We call each other sister wives. She's a photographer and she wanted to do photos for me. So we called her as well. So she came over right before the midwives arrived. Then the midwives arrived and I immediately asked to get checked because I'm, a curious person. I was 7 centimeters, which was amazing because knowing that the first I didn't dilate past 6 centimeters and the second, I did show up to the hospital with my second at 7 centimeters. So that was kind of similar. But it was kind of a time warp after that. I just labored for a while in the tub. Then I got too hot, so I went to my room and I squatted in the doorway. My girls have a gorilla gym. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Mm-mm.
It's almost like a pull-up bar looking thing that hangs in the doorway, but it has hooks and you can connect a swing to it or a rope or a ladder or a yoga silks or anything really.
Cool.
So I had my yoga silks and that it had handles. So I would squat in their doorway while holding the handles, which was super helpful. I highly recommend it. Anything like that, if you're laboring at home, it was very helpful. And I walked around and then I sat on the toilet because my midwife made me and I didn't want to. It was the worst. I hated sitting on the toilet. Some people love it and I just hated it. Then we got back in the tub. I remember coming out of the bathroom from sitting on the toilet, and another woman was in my living room. And I was like, who is this person? But I didn't really care at the time. I was like, hey, welcome to the party. But it ended up being a student midwife, and she needed one more birth in order to be able to take her final tests. And my midwife did tell me that she was going to be there, but I had completely forgotten. And in labor, I was just like, hey, stranger. So her name was Sasha. She was wonderful. And I remember needing to slow dance through a lot of my contractions. And my husband would naturally like try to come to me when I was needing somebody. And I like swatted him away. And I wanted my friend Ashley, who was my photographer, she's super tall. My husband's kind of on the shorter side, as am I. So I just needed that like height to hang on. And something about her smell felt comforting, but I felt really bad about swatting my husband away. So at some point, I got back in the tub. My husband got in the tub and I was shaking my head no. Like I would just say no, no, no. And everybody in the room would say, yes, yes, yes. They're like, remember to be positive, So I'm like remembering my hypno babies and my hypnobirthing and my affirmations that I had all over the wall. And so I would try and change my mindset. And then I began involuntarily bearing down, just like my second birth. And at some point in the tub, my water broke. I felt a pop and saw like a cloud of fluid come out. And every time I pushed, just like every time I was bearing down, just like my second, I got a Charlie horse in my sciatic nerve again, like my side of my butt, like my right hip. And it was the worst pain ever. And I don't, still to this day, it's a mystery as to why this is happening. It must be the placement of my babies and my nerve. And so my chiropractor slash doula, Melissa, was massaging it with arnica and digging her knuckles into it. I had a million bruises after, and I found something that finally worked, but it was the most silliest thing ever. I would say, jiggle, 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 jiggle when I needed her to jiggle my butt. Like she was literally just grabbing my butt and jiggling it as hard as she could. And I was like, jiggle, 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 just to get through it.
It's like shaking the apple tree.
Yes, I was like, oh my God, get rid of it. And then I was pushing in the tub for a long time, but I didn't feel grounded. I had throughout doing my hypno babies and meditations, they have you visualize your birth. And I always visualized it at sunset coming in through the window, and I'm in the tub and I pull the baby out of me. And it was just this most peaceful, blissful thing. Well, I like did not, the tub was just not my thing. I was comforted by it at first, but then like I didn't feel grounded. Like I couldn't get my footing. So we ended up going to my girls' bedroom. They have a firmer mattress, and my chiropractor doula she did like a sideline release, like hip opener reliever to try and open up my pelvis and help with that Charlie horse and work the baby down a little more. Then I remember trying to push in my bedroom on my bed, but I said, it felt like effing quicksand is what I said. God, I feel like I'm in quicksand. And it was so hot, and it was April, so it was still cold in Chicago area. And so we had the plastic on all our windows, and I was like, rip it off, open the windows, I'm so hot. So they like opened up all the windows. Of course, I'm sure the neighbors were like, what is happening in that house? So at some point I got on the floor in my bedroom, and there's like not a lot of room on the floor, but somehow everybody managed to like surround me and comfort me and help me. And something happened, and it was almost like I got irritated, and I was like, this is it, I'm done doing this. Like I got up, didn't say anything to anybody, and I waddled to my girl's bedroom, and I grabbed hold of those handles in the Gorilla Gym handles, and I squatted as deep as I could, and I was like, let's meet, baby, like it's time. And I like bared down with everything that I had, and everybody just kind of followed me, and my photographer friend had to jump over me in order to get a good shot of like the crowning. And that ring of fire, definitely, I understand what everybody says now about the ring of fire, but it kind of just went into like instinct mode at that point. I think that's what happened. It just, my survival instincts kicked in, and I was like, let's go get this baby out, because there really is no other option at this point besides going to the hospital. So she was crowning, and they were giving me support. My husband and my doula were giving me support through every single contraction. The only thing that made me feel grounded was someone holding my forehead and the back of my head and shaking it back and forth, saying yes to me. And my husband doing hip squeezes through every single contraction for I don't know how long. It was a complete time warp, but I fell to my hands and knees, and I pushed so hard. And after that ring of fire, her head came out, and my midwife was like, lift your right leg. And I don't really know if I actually heard her. And I didn't know which leg was which at that point. I'm like, I don't know what to do at this point. So my doula grabbed my right knee and like flung it up, and the baby just seemed to like slide out after that. So thank God there was no, shoulder dystocia or any thing about baby getting stuck, because I was kind of worried. That was one of my fears. And Sasha, the student midwife, helped me guide her out onto the floor of my children's doorway, which happens to be like the messiest part of our house, because it's by the back door where the dogs come in and out and everybody takes off their shoes. I'm like, really? This is the place I chose to have my baby? Not how I envisioned it at all. I was so exhausted that I was like, Vince, you take her. And everyone was like, she's attached to you still. You have to take her. It's like, oh yeah. So they like helped me get her up, and I picked her up and I remember looking at my doula, Melissa, and her face was so big and she had tears streaming down her face. And she was like, "You did it." I was like, so I was still shocked. Like, I didn't feel like that initial, like, I did it moment. I was just like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Like, I just need to lay down. So, and luckily, my friend Ashley had gotten a really beautiful photo of me holding her and laughing. I don't remember what I was laughing at, but I just looked so happy in the moment. I was just like, she came out of my vagina. Guys, like, how does that even happen? And I see it happen all the time as a doula, but like, happening to me was like mind blown.
It's definitely different after having the C-section birth experiences than
Yeah.
having a baby come out of your vagina is like the most incredible. I mean, it's the most incredible thing always, but I think it just has a different meaning after having the
Yeah.
C-sections.
To know that it didn't work, I thought my body was broken. I thought my babies were too big for my pelvis, which is what I was told once by a midwife after my second. Well, it's possible your pelvis just isn't designed to birth your babies. And I'm like, I don't believe that for a second. I just don't. Like, in my gut, I didn't believe it, but it was a fear of mine. Um, so it was surreal. They laid me down to deliver the placenta and do skin to skin. And after the placenta came out, Vince took her to do skin to skin. He like immediately ripped off his shirt. He was like so ready. He was in tears. Like, the whole room was in tears. And I like waddled back to my bedroom with all the cloths in between my legs to get assessed and just relax. And they were like, "Do you want us to weigh her?" And I was like, "Yes." So everybody had their guesses. And I was like, "I think she's going to be like 8 something." Like, I was convinced during my whole pregnancy that she was going to be my smallest. And she ended up being 10 pounds, 8 ounces.
Wow.
So my first was 912, my second was 9'3", and Rayleigh was 10 pounds, 8 ounces.
So
I was
that
like,
right there is
oh
the
my God.
proof that the whole big baby thing is crap.
Baloney. Yes. Bullshit. And
Mm.
that whole, like, you only have a 25% chance of success, right? Like, well, I guess that I'm in the 25%, but I don't like that statistic at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on a birthing high for a while, and I was just laughing, and I was really swearing like a sailor too. Like, looking back, I was like, why was I cussing so much? Like, I don't understand why I was like, I effing did it. Um,
All the
so
adrenaline, maybe.
yeah. And I ended up having a second-degree tear, and hematomas and hemorrhoids. I was a mangled mess down there. I'm not gonna lie. I remember I wanted my husband to like be next to me and hold my hand while I was getting stitched up. So my friend Ashley, my sister wife, I say she imprinted on my baby. She held her and got pooped on. Her first poop was all over Ashley's belly. But I remember seeing my husband's face when he didn't know that anybody was looking at him. He was watching me get stitched up, and the look on his face was like this look of like, oh my God.
That's why
What
you're not
is
supposed to watch
that?
that part.
I'm like, I kind of, in hindsight, wish I would have looked, even though my midwife was like, "Do not look at it." I was like, well, but I'm not easily grossed out by things. She's like, "Don't look at it. Don't." But yeah, it was a rough recovery as well because of the tear and the hematomas. I was on bed rest because they were pretty large. And so it was still rough, but it was a different kind of recovery. I would definitely choose that any day over a C-section for sure. But yeah, it wasn't a walk in the park. I've attended many home births where the mother is just up and walking around and going to the bathroom and eating and just like totally fine. And like, why? Why isn't that for me? But I mean, she was 10 and a half pounds and it was like a first time delivery. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but it was incredible. And I think about it all the time. And I'm like, I did that.
That's
That's pretty
awesome.
awesome.
It
So,
is awesome. That is
and
so
my whole
awesome.
team, it was just like the dream team, everything was just amazing. And I felt so supported and loved and believed in, which was huge. I really think that that's the key, at least for me. The key was having a supportive team and a comfortable, safe environment. And that was my house.
Anything else that you can think of that you would want women to know that are either weighing their options or maybe contemplating having a home birth? I mean, you just said a lot. But anything else that you can think of just that you want to add from what you've learned in your journeys or even as a doula?
I would say to always listen to that voice inside of you, even if your head's like, I don't know, that's not practical. Like if your gut like is telling you that this is the right thing. Oh my gosh, I forgot the coolest part of this whole thing. She was born on her due date at 11:11 p.m.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I was
That is
like,
super
my midwife
cool.
and I, when they were like, what, she turned to the assistant and said, what time is it? And she said 11:11. And I was like, oh, no
That's
way. We just looked at each
crazy.
other like, that's insane. Because my whole pregnancy, we had been texting each other 11:11.
That is
And it was,
super cool. That's
yeah,
just like a cherry on top of everything else that happened. Like a
yeah.
super, super cool side story. That's
And she was
awesome.
born on April 7th, which is 4/7, which also equals 11.
Oh my,
So
that is
my
super cool.
my fiery Aries, and she's 2 now, and she is definitely a spitfire. She is never slows down, this kid. But she was meant to be in this world for sure. And I was
Mhm.
very upset about having the miscarriage, but I just feel like she was meant to be here. So but yeah, trusting your instincts, trusting your gut, having supportive people. And I also was very, very careful with who I told about my home birth. I didn't even tell my parents. I told my sister, or both my sisters, and a couple of my close friends, and that was it. I told my mom maybe the day before, and I didn't tell her until 2 a.m. that she was born. It's like, I love my parents, but they just are worrywarts and they're very into, the traditional way of doing things usually. So I was like, you know what? I don't want to hear their fears. I don't want to hear what they have to say. They may be supportive, but I don't feel like they need to know. So I feel like just keeping your plans to yourself, if they're not within the traditional norm of the people around you, can be very helpful. And it's kind of like keeping yourself safe.
Yeah,
I
protecting
I
your
just found that
space.
to be helpful, kind of
Mhm.
protecting my space. Yeah. So I kind of, with my first baby, kind of like just threw everything out there on Facebook about every little thing that was happening with my pregnancy and my body and my birth. And oh, it's time, I'm going to the hospital. So it's this time I was very private, and it just felt better knowing that there weren't tons of people like waiting on the clock, for me to have this baby. So protect your space, trust your gut, trust your body.
Love it. Well, thank you for sharing all of your stories. That was wonderful to listen to, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Home Birth After Cesarean podcast. Make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you're interested in sharing your home birth after cesarean story, send us an email at hbacpodcast@gmail.com. See you next week.